By Thanksgiving of last year, I was just, I was pretty much like, okay, I'm just going to put a firm boundary up with everybody here. Communicating with Nick was next to impossible. He was so damned and determined to create as much chaos and conflict as he could. Keep in mind, I've just had the life that I built by myself with no help from anyone. None of these people. Sold a home, built a business, built a brand, moved into a new place, went to therapy, went to coaching. All of that warfare I got through. Had someone make the choice to put me in a digital cage and then start to play out this plot in my life. Had all of these people seemingly in the know and for whatever reason, not only unwilling to do their jobs, like the civil servants that were involved here, investigate, offer me any kind of assistance or help, other than what initially came through Children and Family Services. But it was taking too much of my energy to try to even explain. And I didn't know if this was from ignorance or if it was intentional. Even for the victim advocacy groups, some of the Catholic churches, like whatever they could have offered me or whatever they did offer me, it was like it wasn't designed for someone who was a victim. And I remember even saying to the one girl, because I think she was trying to be helpful, but it's like they would have been very appropriate, I guess, for somebody who was struggling with mental health or addictions or something like that. They were like designed to help people get back on their feet from that aspect of things. And it's like, no, I need like a social worker, a law enforcement officer that was willing to investigate here. I don't have a financial issue. I have a stalker. I have a group of stalkers. I have people that are intentionally targeting me because of my spiritual beliefs, because I'm a Christian. Whether they were just trying to, whether they were trying to human move me around or whether they were intentionally trying to take me out. It was like, that was the issue. My IP addresses have been blocked on government sites. People who are not correctly trained that are in those positions, or if they are in an allegiance to a group of individuals, like a Freemason or, whomever, an Eastern Star, whatever their little cult is, if it's just a hate group. I didn't actually know. I had lots of evidence of backing up literally everything I was claiming, but I have a business that I put time and effort in. I am in my purpose. And if this hate group's intention, which was pretty much the one thing I was fairly certain of, was to break my spirit, break my faith, have me move away from my business, because clearly they had already been exploiting my content, and I had already come to discover that there was disgusting, pathetic excuse for women having the audacity to put their face next to my name and my brand. I was already aware that I was experiencing identity theft and people were purchasing things in my name. So when you're talking to county officials, when you're talking to people that are supposed to be advocates that aren't able to make distinguishing between the two, the services that you're going to need and the help that you're going to need, the protection you're going to need. It would be the same thing as somebody who was trying to exit a domestic situation, except I didn't even have that. And ultimately, again, just a colossal failure on the part of the justice system, because you're always going to have crazy people out here. You're always going to have crazy cult groups. You're always going to have that. But when the justice system becomes a part of that and they utilize their positions to abuse people or to just look the other way, if for nothing else, I hope that my story can be evidence of the catastrophes that can happen in people's lives, in children's lives. And it's unfortunate that this group of people have not learned anything and are still unwilling to take accountability for the parts that they played, because it would be very impactful for them to just be taking accountability and speaking up about what they did. I mean, that would have an even bigger impact than me having to rehash this entire situation and all of the efforts and the many layers that they went to, and the reckless and continued efforts. To me, it's insane that I even have to relive all of this in such detail just to be able to get assistance and advocate for myself, to get myself and my children justice, to make sure that my own child is safe, when every part of my life foundationally was built around creating safety for both my children, but particularly my son. You know, I left a corporate career and could still even have gone back to that. And I think that's just the most interesting part of this whole thing, and also what led me to believe that there had to be some likelihood of some human moving in this situation, besides the fact that there seemed to be some tie to at least some of the Freemasons who are known for that. And, you know, there seemed to be some tie to the Jesuits, who are also known for that. I mean, they have a history of that in their organization. I'm going to include some videos. I'm actually going to make a whole video on certain parts of things I'm speaking on, but just so I can stay on track, that all of them are bad. Again, I feel like I have to keep repeating this because there's good and bad. And it is actually these people who are a negative reflection onto certain organizations, like the Jesuits. That's why it's so important for the Catholic Church to rebuke that organization. And there's a reason they're not doing that. And the same thing goes with the Freemasons. I mean, these are people that are utilizing your organization, your doctrines, to commit crimes. And I'm aware that they know this. So, you know, it's like, what are you going to do? To me, it seems completely insane that any civil servant, any government officer, any member of the justice system would even be allowed to take an oath to a secret society. I mean, it's a conflict of interest. I think it's insane. But that's my personal belief. And, you know, I'm just one person in that way. But in terms of my personal beliefs and my own independence, my own freedom, my own sovereignty, my desire and God's desire for me to live out my God-given destiny, that is something that nobody has control over besides me and God. Certainly not any member of this group, certainly not any member of my family who has not contributed in one way to supporting me, especially through this. And to me, if you are okay with knowing all of the effort that I put in, the steps that I took to recreate my whole life, I mean, over years. We're not talking about a short period of time here. We're talking about years of a deep, introspective healing process that all of these people knew I was going through. And it was very obvious. And how I also know that they know this, because they had a plan that they were unsuccessful in. I believe that they likely thought that they were going to take me out back in 2019 or 2020. And all of the efforts that they have gone to, all of these different measures to try to probably conceal what they had already done. Mother, with her history and the fact that she's literally trying to play out the same thing with my child, my 10-year-old right now, that she did to my dad. Like, she's literally trying to recreate history. And it's like, how anybody could like support her or be behind her and not speak out against what she's doing. How anybody could even accept somebody who is covered in curses that would even do something like that, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. But that's for them to learn. That has nothing to do with me. I don't have to tell. I wouldn't even be talking about this. It is difficult for me to even have to go through all of this again, because of the ways I heal as I'm going through it, and because I just kept myself protected through this whole thing, and God protected me through this whole thing. It truly was like being in a shell, being God's little pearl in a shell while there's this like massive hurricane going on all around me that had nothing to do with me. It had to do with completely the choice of the people and the choices that they made. It literally had nothing to do with me. I never engaged. I never took revenge. The only engagement that they got out of me was in the moments that they did, specifically Nick and my mother, the extreme that affected my children. Like a direct impact with my children. And they know that, though. That is abuse. That's abuse. I have no idea how anybody could let this go on. You have to consider this also. Not only do I likely have a whole community of people that have been supporting me, or at least they thought they were supporting me this entire time, but they weren't. I mean, if you think about it, these people had to be responding to messages, responding to comments. If you truly think about the lengths that they had to go to steal my actual business, my LLC, take over my content, take over my platforms, reroute my data to a separate container, and then continue to sell my content and keep me blocked off behind a firewall, block my IP address on all the social sites, on government sites, hack my PayPal, hack my Cash App, and literally be collecting money as me, all of these people, selling my brand. So it's like, I don't know if they, I have no idea who all is in on this other than the people that, were dumb enough to put their face next to my name. And so I have no idea what would ever make them think they would get away with this. It also begs the question as to how or why my mother and Nick would be involved. Well, when I started to dig just a little bit deeper and actually went out to the cemetery where my biological father is allegedly buried, which was strange because all of the information led to either New York or Florida. And so it seemed like there was two different people. And it seemed like the person from Florida had a whole life there. Purchased land in Pensacola, Florida, all of that. Obviously, that person was a Jester Schreiner, which would make sense though and fall right into line with the fact that the Royal Order of the Jester branch was formed in 1981, which was the year that I was born. Which would also make sense though, because that was right around the time that my mom was being an adulterer. So she was a part of like some kind of sex prostitution ring with married men or whatever. She just partied with them. I have no idea. She can't tell the truth about it. So I don't know. But by both accounts, this person appears to have passed away in 2018. And what was strange though, is somebody who had what would appear to be very, very wealthy, had obviously some affiliation to a ranch in Texas, and some affiliation to the Jesters. But when I went to visit the cemetery, it's like this just a plaque in the ground, and just had what would appear to be like a very abundant life. So strange. Typically you don't see just a plaque in the ground. No symbolism around being a retired naval officer. No symbolism even on his plaque for the Freemasons, which was strange. But there were some other clues at the cemetery that day. The biggest one was that my grandfather did have a Freemason emblem. So that sort of confirmed for me that there might be some affiliation here, or have something at least pertaining to these people. as to why all of this was happening. I also discovered that it would appear that there were some members of the family right there that had passed away very young. But when I looked for records on them, I couldn't find them. But what I did find is a transsexual that has a very close, similar name to a female member of my biological family that passed away very young. It just seemed like a lot of them had short lives, but maybe the exception of my grandfather. And my grandfather's name, ironically, is Abram. Abram Sage. Which was fascinating, given that the very first part of Scripture, when I was called to use Scripture, use the Word of God as a blueprint, as a map, to reread it. I had already read the Bible, but to reread it from the direction for which God was giving me. And the first chapter of the Bible, the main character of the Bible actually, that I was called to learn about was Abraham. And how this entire journey has played out, who I am, just as a human being, as a spiritual being, and what I do know of this situation, and the fact that my faith is all that I had in this situation. These people literally took everything from me. I mean, they stripped me straight down to nothing. They took every dime I had. They took my business. They took my brand. And then, even when I had nothing, they still had to take more because I was still breathing. I still seemed too happy. I still had an open heart. I was still smiling at strangers. I was still offering to do kind things for people. Because when that's who you are as a person, it doesn't matter who anybody else is. It doesn't matter what anybody projects at you. And that's all that I focused on, was continuing to be who I am. And definitely for my son, very difficult on him. To see that his dad was like creating all of this chaos. He's like, he sees his mama just like have everything stripped of her. I mean, me and William are so connected. Me and my daughter are too, but me and my son we're very similar. And it's very hard to watch, because all his dad would have had to do was just have some compassion and be patient. But it was the lack of compassion, the lack of empathy, the lack of patience, the lack of understanding, like, basic, typical qualities for anyone who is a good person and not a narcissist. And it was the absence of those qualities by virtually every member of my family, and Nick, and, his family that I did interact with, although I didn't interact with many of them. And really anybody else is like, nobody was really reaching out to me except the people that were already in my life genuinely showed that they cared. But I had to be very cautious also, because I knew that these people would target anybody that I communicated with. They were hacking my device. I mean, shit, they changed the language and I couldn't even change it back. They changed the language to Hebrew. I literally just had to roll with the punches. Every time they did something, I had to just move around it, just deal with it in the moment. And of course I knew they were delaying me and likely exploiting my content. But again, all of that energy has to go somewhere. And when you are following God's will, you will allow that to go the way that it needs to go. God wanted them to be the alternate at the proverbial top of this mountain, because it damn sure ain't going to be me, and it isn't going to be either of my children. So I'm fairly certain God allowed them to hunt me and to chase me, because I was always on the journey to get to the top of the mountain, to get to my divine inheritance, to keep my promise to God, to show God and anybody else who was observing my suffering that I am not forsaken. And my God would never forsake me, nor would God forsake any of the children, any of his treasure. And so, for all I know, some of them, as they would be the alternate in this case, their fear is what they were supposed to sacrifice. And for anybody who doesn't actually know and understand the concept of Abraham, I know a lot of Satanists like to really twist this. God was never testing Abraham to sacrifice his child. The test was a test of his faith for Abraham to sacrifice all fear and be in complete faith that God would never ask you to sacrifice love, because God is love. He kept his promise to love. He sacrificed his fear, and at the top of the mountain there was an alternate. And so anybody who wants to continue to project fear at me, you might already be falling. Maybe God just wants you to hit so hard you don't actually get up again.